Captain Lena Ramirez was not a small woman, but next to the mountains of muscle surrounding her in the cramped airplane cabin, she felt invisible. She was on leave, flying from Ramstein back to Charleston, South Carolina, and wore her Air Force flight suit, the dark, sturdy material carrying the faint smell of jet fuel and sweat, a smell she loved more than any perfume. Her official rank patch, Captain, U.S. Air Force, was clearly visible, as were the wings pinned above her breast pocket, signifying her status as a heavy transport pilot. She flew the massive C-17 Globemasters, planes as big as houses and as tough as a mountain range. It wasn't the F-22 she had dreamed of as a girl, but it was honest, crucial work, demanding more skill and nerve than most people realized. She settled into her window seat, 22A, trying to ignore the man who had wedged himself into the aisle seat, 22C. He was easily 6'5", covered in tattoos and wore a simple navy t-shirt. Everything about him screamed Special Forces, but she knew better than to ask. Next to her, in 22B, sat an elderly woman reading a paperback, thankfully quiet. The giant in the aisle, however, was not quiet. He shifted constantly, sighing heavily, pulling his phone out, then putting it back. When he finally looked over and saw Lena's uniform, a slow, condescending grin spread across his face. "Excuse me, Captain," he rumbled, his voice deep and rough. He didn't sound respectful, though. He sounded amused. "You with the Air Force, huh? Good on you. Flight crew, I guess? Or are you a combat medic? You look like you're heading back from a long deployment." Lena looked him straight in the eye. She was used to this. "Pilot," she said, her voice clear and measured. The man, who she now noticed had a chief petty officer's anchor tattoo visible on his forearm, let out a short, scoffing laugh. "A pilot," he repeated, leaning forward just enough to be insulting. "Right, well, a real pilot. A jet pilot. Not to disrespect your service, Captain, but most of the women I see flying are usually carrying coffee trays or maybe signing papers in an office somewhere. I guess a big transport aircraft needs a smaller crew." The quiet old woman in 22B lowered her book and shot the seal a look that could curdle milk. But Lena simply smiled, a tight, controlled expression that didn't reach her eyes. "I fly the line." "Chief," Lena replied, using his rank with deliberate coolness. "I get the important cargo where it needs to go, including men like you. And for the record, I'm qualified on 3 different airframes." The SEAL just shrugged, unmoved, pulling out a pair of large headphones. "Sure thing, Captain. Whatever you say. Just don't let those delicate hands accidentally hit the emergency exit on the way out, okay?" Lena felt the familiar burn of injustice. She hadn't earned her wings just to be dismissed as a tea server by a giant who thought his size equaled his skill. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let the plane's engines, the smooth, powerful roar of them, wash over her. She would let her service speak for itself, even if this arrogant chief never heard the answer. Part 2. The quiet desperation in the cabin. 3 hours into the transatlantic flight, the mood in the cabin changed from sleepy routine to unsettling tension. The plane, a commercial wide-body jet, was flying high over the Atlantic. Lena, who rarely slept on flights, was monitoring the subtle cues of the aircraft. She felt the slight, irregular drag in the airframe, a flutter that was too sharp to be normal turbulence. Her pilot instincts, honed over thousands of hours of flight time in unforgiving conditions, kicked in immediately. Something was wrong. Up in 22C, the SEAL, who had been loudly snoring with his headphones on, suddenly jerked awake. He looked around, his massive body tensing. Even he, a ground fighter, could sense the wrongness of the motion. Then came the announcement, the voice of the captain cracking with a nervous tremor. It wasn't the smooth, cheerful voice that had welcomed them aboard. "Attention, passengers. This is your captain speaking. We are experiencing some minor technical difficulties. We have activated our emergency protocol and the cabin crew is standing by. Please remain calm and seated. We anticipate a slight delay in our arrival." "Minor technical difficulties," the SEAL muttered, pulling his headphones off and looking at Lena. "That's pilot talk for we're on fire." "Captain, it means they're following procedure," Lena countered, but her eyes were fixed on the wing outside her window. The engine housing looked fine, but the feel of the aircraft was heavy, unbalanced. A flight attendant, pale and moving quickly, rushed down the aisle, her walkie-talkie whispering static. She stopped near row 22, her eyes wide as she looked past Lena toward the back of the plane. Suddenly, a second, more frantic announcement cut through the cabin, this time from the first officer. "Attention! We have a medical emergency in the cockpit." The captain is incapacitated. "We need immediate assistance. Is there a qualified pilot or co-pilot on board? We need a pilot now. Please, anyone with a commercial or military pilot license report to the flight deck immediately." A wave of absolute terror washed over the passengers. Screaming broke out behind them. The quiet old woman in 22B grasped Lena's arm with surprising strength, her nails digging in. The SEAL's big, tough face went slack with shock, the bravado draining out of him instantly. He looked at the chaos, then back at Lena, his eyes asking the silent question. "Is this real?" Lena didn't flinch. Her heart rate had actually slowed. The fear and panic of the other passengers seemed to isolate her, leaving her in a bubble of complete calm. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't a maintenance issue. This was a crisis, and the plane had just become the C-17 she was trained to save. "My God, a pilot!" the old woman choked out. "Will anyone answer?" Lena gently placed her hand over the woman's and squeezed, a gesture of reassurance. She didn't say a word. She simply reached down, undid her seatbelt, and stood up in the narrow aisle. The SEAL in 22C, Chief Holloway, had been moments away from asking her to check if the life jackets were under his seat. But now, he looked up at the diminutive, determined woman in the Air Force flight suit, realizing with a jolt that he had just seen her rank and wings. He watched, speechless, as she moved. Lena stood in the aisle, all 5'4" of her, towering over the chief, who was still seated, his mouth slightly open. The noise and panic of the other passengers seemed to stop when they saw her, their desperate focus shifting to the single person answering the call. A flight attendant ran up to her, tears welling in her eyes. "Oh, thank God. Are you a pilot, ma'am? Can you fly one of these?" "I fly military transport," Lena stated clearly, her voice cutting through the remaining noise. "4 engines, heavy cargo. I can fly your plane. Lead me to the cockpit." The flight attendant immediately escorted her forward. As they passed the stunned Chief Holloway in row 22, he finally found his voice. It was no longer the arrogant, mocking tone from earlier. It was raw, shocked, and laced with shame. He caught her arm, his massive hand surprisingly gentle. "Captain," he rasped, his eyes fixed on her. The disdain was gone, replaced by a terrible realization of his earlier cruelty. "Wait, you're going to do this?" Lena looked at him, her expression a mix of steely resolve and quiet disappointment. She didn't lecture him or rub his mistake in his face. The moment was too serious for petty scores. "I'm going to land this bird, Chief," she said simply, pulling her arm away. "That's what they trained me for." As she turned to continue toward the front of the plane, Chief Holloway looked from her back to her empty seat, to the chaos of the passengers. He whispered the title's shocking question, a moment of profound, painful self-recognition, loud enough only for the elderly woman in 22B to hear, from passenger to pilot. The tiny captain in row 22. "Is she going to fly this?" Moments later, Lena was on the flight deck. The first officer, a young man who looked like he was about to vomit, was fighting a runaway control yoke. "Thank God." "Captain, who are you?" he stammered. "Captain Ramirez, Air Force, C-17. What's your problem?" "We lost hydraulic pressure on the left side. The landing gear warning light is solid red, and we have extreme crosswinds at the alternate landing strip in Newfoundland. The captain is unconscious." "I can't stabilize the yaw. It's too much plane." Lena didn't hesitate. She strapped herself into the captain's seat. "Move over. Give me the yoke. Call Newfoundland Tower. Tell them we have a military pilot taking command. I want wind speed, crosswind angle, and runway length." Now she took control. Immediately she felt the massive commercial jet trying to tear itself out of her grasp, but her heavy transport training was perfect for this. The C-17 was all about fighting wind and weight. The airliner was lighter, but the principles of control were the same. She was fighting a mechanical beast, not an enemy jet, and she knew how to win that fight. The next 20 minutes were a blur of intense, focused action. Lena and the young first officer, whose name was Sam, worked in perfect, desperate sync. Sam became her air traffic control and checklist coordinator, his fear replaced by professional obedience. Newfoundland reports wind shear possible on final approach, Captain. Crosswind component 32 knots, gusting to 45. Sam yelled over the roar of the airframe, which protested every correction. A 32-knot crosswind was treacherous for a normal landing. 45 was flirting with disaster. With limited hydraulics, it meant the plane would respond sluggishly, forcing Lena to use raw engine power and rudder to compensate, a technique few commercial pilots ever practiced. Back in the cabin, Chief Holloway was now a human sea anchor. He was calming the passengers, his intimidating presence now a source of comfort. He kept repeating, "We've got a military captain up there. She knows what she's doing. Stay calm." He kept looking at the cockpit door, remembering his words from just a few hours ago. He was waiting for judgment, not from God, but from the woman he had so casually diminished. In the cockpit, Lena was fighting the machine with every ounce of her strength. The yoke required immense force to move against the failing hydraulics. She was using her full body weight, her knuckles white, her forehead beaded with sweat. Her C-17 had power steering. This didn't. "Gear down checklist," Lena snapped. "Gear down confirmed," Sam replied, his voice still shaky but steadying. "But the light is still red, Captain. We might have a partial lock." "We'll take it," Lena said. "I need 100% concentration, Sam. When we touch down, I need you on the thrust reversers the instant I call." "Do not hesitate." She lined up the runway, the ground rushing up faster than she wanted. The wind hit them like a fist, shoving the plane sideways. "Hard rudder, Captain! Hard rudder!" Sam screamed. Lena braced, her jaw clenched. She pushed the rudder pedal with her entire leg, the pain shooting through her knee. Then she executed a perfect, controlled slip, a daring maneuver where she turned the nose into the wind while keeping the wings level, to bleed off speed and compensate for the drift. They hit the tarmac hard. Not a crash, but a jarring, bone-shaking thump. Sam immediately activated the thrust reversers. The plane screamed, shuddered, and finally began to slow. The landing was safe, but brutal. They slid to a halt just shy of the end of the runway. Silence fell over the cabin, followed by an explosion of cheers and applause, mixed with hysterical sobs of relief. Lena slumped back in the seat, momentarily unable to move. She looked down at her hands. Her right hand, which had gripped the yoke with vice-like force for the last 10 minutes, was trembling uncontrollably, and a sharp, tearing pain radiated up her wrist and forearm. It wasn't just tired, it was hurt. She had pushed her physical limits to save the plane. The first officer, Sam, looked at her, tears streaming down his face. "Captain Ramirez, you saved us," he whispered. "You saved us all." Part fee. Respect earned and the exposure of Truth Emergency Services swarmed the aircraft. Lena refused to leave the cockpit until the passengers were safely off. When she finally did emerge, supported by Sam, the entire cabin erupted in a standing ovation. Chief Holloway was waiting by the door. He didn't speak. He simply stood at attention, a difficult posture in the narrow aisle, and gave Captain Lena Ramirez a slow, deep Navy salute, the highest sign of respect one soldier can give another. When he dropped his hand, he looked her in the eyes, no longer seeing a smaller crew member, but a warrior. "I owe you an apology, Captain," the chief said, his voice thick with emotion. "I judged you. I was wrong. You're the best pilot I've ever met." "Just doing my job, Chief," Lena replied, trying to downplay the pain in her wrist. She was taken to the hospital for her injury. It was a severe strain and possible fracture, a small price for 100 lives. The next day, as she lay in the hospital, Chief Holloway visited her. He brought flowers and a large, simple card. "I made some calls, Captain," he said, sitting heavily on the visitor's chair. "When you land a civilian jet with limited hydraulics in a 45-knot crosswind, people notice. I told my contacts the full story. I told them you were mocked and then you saved us." He paused, his eyes turning serious. "I also found out who the original captain was. The one who had the heart attack. Lena looked confused. The guy who needed the medical emergency? His name is Colonel Vance, the chief revealed. He's a legend in the fighter community. He was also the one who reviewed your file 7 years ago. The one who personally flagged you as too light-framed for high-G maneuvering and denied your transfer from transport to the F-35 program. He was the reason you were stuck flying the heavy line when your scores were among the best in the Air Force. Lena felt a chill. The injustice of 7 years ago suddenly hit home. Her underestimated status, the constant petty remarks, it all stemmed from that one prejudiced evaluation. Chief Holloway smiled, a genuine, powerful smile this time. Here came the twist. Well, the Air Force needed a new hero yesterday, Captain. And the Navy needs to feel proud of the people we travel with. My friends made sure the right reports went to the right generals. You are being decorated for outstanding heroism and skill. And the best part? The Chief of Staff for the Air Force saw your flight data. He saw how you handled that crosswind. He saw the skill Colonel Vance dismissed. He leaned closer. They are fast-tracking your transfer. They need someone with your nerve to fly their newest high-G prototype. It's not a fighter, Captain. It's the future. And they want you at the stick. Lena felt the sting of tears, not of pain, but of powerful, long-delayed justice. The arrogant chief's question in row 22 had set off a chain of events that exposed the truth. Her strength was not about her size. It was about her skill and her grit. So, Chief Holloway said, standing and offering a hand that was now respectfully held back, I guess you are no longer a passenger, Captain. You're finally flying your own mission. Lena looked at the hand that had once dismissed her and now offered her a future. She accepted the handshake, the pain in her wrist a badge of honor. She had earned her redemption not with revenge, but by saving the life of the very man who had tried to hold.